Okay, hi everyone. This is a quick update lecture for you related to definition and the assignments that you are to be completing online for the next week or two. Uh, Definition is a little different as a paper in that you will not be typing it in Microsoft Office. You will not be using Microsoft Word. You will be using Connect for it. So I do want to talk with you all about that and show you the process. So you can see here this is one of my online sections, 130180. If you're in 130184L, this applies to you as well. My face-to-face sections will actually be doing the essay in class during class time. I typically assign an in-class essay about the middle of the semester for a number of reasons. For one, it is one of the main ways that college professors and instructors will evaluate your learning as you progress through your degrees. So whether you're planning on completing a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree or even going on to graduate school, as many of you might be planning on, you will encounter in-class essays. They're pretty standard for end of semester exams as well, and this is why we have exam periods typically set aside for face-to-face classes, and the schedule changes for exam week. If you are in face-to-face classes, be sure that you find out from your instructor or professor what the exam schedule is and exactly the expectations of that exam are. For my online students, you'll complete the exam obviously online in a timed setting, and we'll talk about that when we get closer. So you're going to encounter these sorts of assignments as you progress through your academic career. Also, it is a good way to evaluate how much you've learned about uh, writing, organization, and development of a quality essay, how well you've been reading the chapters and applying the knowledge that you are gaining from those chapters. So the in-class setting is a little different. The timed essay is a little different in that typically you will not be doing research, or the research you'll be doing will be informal, and the evidence that you'll be using to support a position will generally come from what we can call universal knowledge, or knowledge that the majority of educated citizens in our culture should share. And notice that there's always exceptions to that rule. So the definition mode as a rhetorical mode really works well with this assignment as well, because a definition is really the full term for the rhetorical mode. Deals with an extended definition. It's taking a term or a phrase or a concept and developing an essay using illustration or division and classification, the earlier rhetorical modes, to help you define the concept in a clearer fashion or a unique fashion. And we'll return to that in just a minute. So some of the logistics of this assignment, you see here that this is the D2L page again, 130180, 130184, some kind of code like that typically for online students. And you can go in and click content, and you should be looking at the definition assignment now. I actually have to go into mine. I'm going to switch to teacher view for a second. Bear with me because I have not visited in this section all of these yet. So I am going to clear out that requirement and that requirement so that we can now see that in student view. Okay. So we should go back to student view now. There we are. We're back in student view. And we see here definition. This is the module you'll start working in this week if you haven't already. So you have a Chapter 18 PowerPoint. This will open here. You see it actually broken up in the slides here as a PDF. If you download it, you'll need Microsoft Office in order to open it. Let's see here. We're not going to go over this too much, but I do want you to see it follows the chapter pretty exclusively, but it's not as thorough as the chapter. So it's a good thing to use as a review for the information. There we go. So you can see this, how it goes through all the key ideas of the chapter. Particularly useful for you will be these graphic organizers. Graphic organizers, I cannot overemphasize how just amazing they are in helping you to organize your own thinking and your own writing. So practice using these as you're developing ideas for this essay. So there's some information here that you can look at as well. Now, the next thing that I want you to see, let me clear that out. That's for when we practice. In the module is this Connect Activity 4, which you need to be working on. You see that it is due on the 21st. That's about 7 days away from this video, this current video. So we're going to log into Connect. We're going to view that as a student. Okay, so you see here that you have Connect Activity 4. This first one here is actually the one I want you to work on. This one is a duplicate. We'll cut that out. So you'll need to go in and start working on this as a way to help you study for the definition paper and to help you with your writing. So we're going to talk about the essay exam and how you prepare for it. And there's reading for this in the Writing Matters textbook, which if you go back to the very first module, I sent you a shorter syllabus. It's attached on there. I think it's a 2-page syllabus that has a reading schedule. That syllabus lists the page numbers that cover this content in Writing Matters. If you are looking at it digitally, if you're looking at the ebook version of this, you can just go to Preparing to Take an Essay Exam. You can go look in that book itself. Here's the book. You can see it. There's the link for the ebook. We open up the ebook. We can scroll down and you can see here Preparing for and Taking an Essay Exam, Chapter 24, and you can go in and start reading this to help you study for the Connect quiz. Okay, so let's go back to the assignment again and Connect. Now I'm back in here as a teacher. I haven't opened this yet. I'm going to open this shortly. You see that the dates are actually not that far away. I'm going to open it after I've graded your definition and classification papers. This is the teacher view. That's why you can't see it yet. Once it's opened, you will have, once you've opened this assignment, it'll give you, let me go back here. Let's open it up this way. Okay, so again, you won't be able to view this until I make it accessible for you. But once you open it, it'll, let me go in and change that too. I apologize. I've got it locked for you all because I don't want you to go in and start it before you've gotten some of this key information in the chapter and in this lecture. So let's see here. We'll go in and we'll set the date. Where is the start date? They're not letting me change the assignment date. Oh, there it is. We'll change it to today. We'll change the assignment date through the 27th. Okay. There we go. Now we should be able to access it. I haven't assigned it yet, so that's when you'll get to see it. Let's assign it. There we go. There we go. Now we've got it. Okay. So let's go back to student view. So when you go to open this, it'll say something along the lines, for English 1301 online students, the in-class definition essay will be completed through Connect. All other students will complete this essay during a class meeting. Okay, got it. And then you will have to type your essay in here. Once you start it, it will be timed. When you complete, I don't want any attachments or anything here. When you complete it, you're going to click submit. I'm in the student preview, so it's not going to let me do it, but you will need to add that. You'll need to click that. And that's really all there is to it. It has a little typing box here. You have font family. You want to keep your font standard. So something like Times New Roman. Font size, set it to 12 like we've talked about before in any of the formatting. Now since this is an in-class essay, there's some things that you won't be able to do that you typically do, let's say in typing in Word. This is a very limited obviously text system here, so you won't be able to do the standard double spacing. You won't be able to do hanging indents and that sort of thing. At least I haven't figured out how to use that with these text options in Connect. So that will be made available. I'm going to go close that again so y'all can't see it just yet. And we'll make that available after I've completed grading your papers, hopefully this weekend. So you notice the due date has been changed on that. So that is where you will write the definition paper. So you have this Connect assignment 4, the Connect activity 4. You'll have the definition paper done in Connect. Let's go back to the module. You have this defining an idea, which some of you have already started, and I've really enjoyed the posts so far. Those of you in 130180, 130184 needs to post a few more. And then you have a quiz based on your successful college writing reading. So that is what you need to be working on in D2L. So let's talk now about, let's actually talk about definition as a rhetorical mode, since that is the mode you'll be using. And I am going to open up that slideshow again and use this as a touchstone for our conversation. And I'll be switching from this to a Word document where I'll be typing things out as well to help you. Okay, so we're going to expand this now so you can see it. And then let me pull that Word document up. So it is the second item, and we can see it in there as well. Sorry. Let's see, what is that? Is that the Word document? Good old technology, right? Sometimes it works and sometimes it does not. So let's close out those windows. Let's make sure that y'all have the Word document so you can see. So that one can actually be deleted. There we go. And then we are going to make this our next document. Window capture. Let's see what it gives us. Okay, good. So now we have the Microsoft Word document up as well. Okay, so let's start with the lecture. So when we're talking about definition, we are essentially explaining what we mean by a concept, an abstraction. So in the English language, a number of our words have unclear definitions. They have what we can think of as connotative definitions. For my face-to-face classes, I might have recorded this in a lecture video for you all. I had students look up the definition of the term human. Let's do that real quick so you can see this. So when we type in the definition human, and we get things like humana, videos of human. Let's actually make it a little more specific. And we get this definition here from the Oxford Dictionaries. Of, relating to, are characteristic of people or human beings. Now, one of the problems with that definition, that adjective, or the noun definition here, a human being, especially a person, as distinguished from an animal, or in science fiction, an alien, is that it's basically defining the term using the term. It's saying a human is a human, and we all know what humans are. They look like these images down here, right? Although that doesn't look very human, and that would be freaky if we all looked like that when we encountered one another. And we know that not everybody looks like this either, or this. So if we're just doing something with the term human, looking at its denotation, this is okay because it's generally accepted and understood what a human is. However, this is not very specific, right? Uh, for somebody who's just learning the English language, for example, this would be pretty confusing. It's like saying water is water, or water is relating to or characteristic of water. It doesn't really give us any clarity. So often with these words, which are called abstractions, what we get is a very unclear denotation. And the reason for that is because there are so many usages of the word, connotative usages of the word, that it can be quite confusing to people trying to discover what a word means. So what you're writing now is going to be a extended definition, and of course I want you to read these model essays that are in the textbook and look at the graphic organizers. And you have a guided writing assignment, which is actually what I've adopted your definition possibilities from. And there's a nice student essay too, where they define guerrilla street art, the term guerrilla street art and how it's useful. And then you have some other patterns where they use autism spectrum and define what that means in the text. A definition explains what a term means or which meaning is intended when a word has several different meanings. So an extended definition then is actually going to do this. An extended definition, let's go to the Word document. An extended definition, make sure it's typing. Yeah, y'all can see that. I'll increase the view so it's a little easier for you to see. If you're like me, sometimes it's hard to see. An extended definition will attempt to define an abstraction in new and unique ways, looking at its connotation. The goal is not to simply repeat denotation. For this reason, it is important that you, and I want to emphasize this, that you do, I'm going to put it in bold so it's emphasized, that you do not use a dictionary to write the definition essay. The reason for this is exactly what I was illustrating again with the definition from the internet of human. This definition, which really doesn't tell us anything, and as you can see here, it really closes off the conversation, really. It just doesn't give us enough data to write an interesting paper. So what we want to look at instead is connotation rather than denotation. Uh, these terms, what do they mean? Well, denotation is the dictionary definition of a word. And connotation is the emotional and historical usages of the word. It is the word's meaning based on contextual variables. And it is that actual fact that some words have this contextual definition, this contextual usage, that makes a rhetorical mode of definition possible. If there was only one single definition, if words did not evolve over time in their meanings, then we'd have nothing really to write about, which I suppose would make life a bit simpler for all of us, but much less rich and much less interesting. So, when you're explaining what your word means, you need to be focused on a single definition and be detailed using explanations. You don't want to actually include a standard definition of the term, a denotation, but you would maybe want to give the class for the term and some clear characteristics or details that are, how should we say, familiar, particularly if you're going to approach the definition of a concept in an unfamiliar way. You want to make a point, so this does need a thesis statement. What we're noticing in your division and classification papers is that you divide and classify, but then you don't go to the next step and actually explain the use of that division and classification. That rather it is just left at explaining the division and classification. You can use illustration and division and classification to help you develop this, and you want to use some ideas such as negation and address misconception. So you can actually define a term by what it is not. You see here some graphic organizers, which by now you should have a pretty good idea of the organization of a paper. I'm going to talk a bit more about this on our note sheet in just a second. All right, so three things I want you to test your writing by as you're thinking about this is, are you objective in your definition? Are you using objective language? Rather than telling people they should believe what you are writing, you are showing them why your definition is correct. You want to test and see if the definition is evasive. Does that mean it's circular? It avoids dealing with difficult issues, or it doesn't really give us more information about the concept? And does the definition include all possibilities of the term? So let's start working about this and thinking about this. I've actually already done a lecture for another class, so I'm going to pull up that document real quick for us and copy and paste some concepts out of that lecture for you all, because I believe it will help make this a lot clearer. So if you turn in the textbook to the guided writing assignment, this of course is your jumping off point for this essay, and they give you some possibilities. So the first possibility is you can define a key concept from an introductory psychology, sociology, or economics course, such as ethnocentrism, diaspora, or monopoly capitalism. Now, some of you may be taking a political science course right now. Some of you may be taking an anatomy and physiology course. Some of you may be taking a criminal justice course. And there will be abstract concepts in there that would require definition for people who do not work in that field or who are not taking that course. So you may want to mine that vocabulary as a way to actually help you study for that class and complete this assignment. Another thing you might look at is defining a specific type of music, such as indie rock or free jazz or hip hop. This guided writing assignment is on 443, by the way, if you haven't already looked at it. You may want to define an inappropriate behavior, such as distracted driving or stalking. You can define a type of television show, which is actually the example I'm going to run with shortly and show you. You can look at an unusual sport or leisure activity, such as curling or spelunking. The key is that when you define a term, when you are working in this definition, that you that you that you approach it from the standpoint that this essay, this concept, this term has multiple possible meanings. A good example of this is the term socialism, which is coming up a lot since we are an example of denotation, connotation, and the concept of abstraction and concrete language, which I will talk about in just a second. If I can type, is let's move this over a bit so you all can see it. There we go. I have to shrink it down. I apologize. Let me shrink this down for you. Hopefully that works. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Is the term socialism. Okay, so first off, let's look at the denotation of the term. That is its dictionary definition. And when we look up its dictionary definition, we actually get something relatively not scary, right? We get this concept. The community shares ownership of property. That definition comes from the Oxford Dictionary. And when we see that, it makes this term socialism a bit less frightening, right? It's an economic system in which the community shares all the ownership of property and makes decisions about how that property is distributed. So then, though, when it's used in like a sentence like Bernie Sanders is a socialist, as it's sometimes used in the media, it has a connotative meaning, which in this case, the meaning of this will be dependent on a number of variables. And this variable list is quite extensive. So the meaning of this term will depend on Let me pull these terms up for you. The following, let's copy and paste that. The time when the word is said, the speaker who is saying the word, the speaker's race or nationality, the speaker's age, the speaker's audience, who they're talking to, the speaker's religion or ideology. And these two things are often not separate in our culture in particular. They're often treated in the same way in that they influence how we see certain symbols and certain words. Also, who is receiving the word, the audience's race or nationality, the audience's age, the audience's total makeup, is it diverse or homogeneous, and the audience's religion or ideology. So for somebody who considers themselves a Republican, this term has a huge amount of negative connotation to it, because essentially this idea is contrary to capitalism, the economic concept of capitalism, which is individuals own property and determine how that property is used, and that all goods are determined, their values determined by supply and demand, whereas socialism actually looks at a community and it's based on need. So from a Republican standpoint, if your audience member was Republican, typically older, or somebody, let's say, who grew up in the 1950s, who experienced the Red Scare, the communist threat, where socialism and communism were often combined, even though they were very different concepts. They were often used as the same concept. This would create a negative connotative meaning. So suddenly, the term socialist, which has a non-threatening denotation, becomes, through connotation, a label that should be, or that people wish to avoid in American, we should say U.S. because there's more than one American country, politics, right? So this denotation, which seems relatively not threatening, actually is trumped here. That's kind of ironic to use that phrase considering our current politics, but is trumped by connotation. Connotation is everything with words. And I'm sure you can think of more blatant examples where words have changed meaning depending on who says it, how it's saying, how it's being said, when it's being said, what the audience is, all these connotations, all these contexts that create the words. Now, in order for this to typically work, the word must be an abstraction. An abstraction is a word that represents an idea or concept that does not have a sensory referent. Okay, that's fancy language for basically saying that an abstraction is an idea that cannot be sensed. For example, let's take the word love. Love cannot be tasted. It cannot be smelled. It cannot be touched. It cannot be heard, nor can it be seen. Not in a way that all humans will agree upon, nor can we really define exactly what love is. We use it to refer to feelings for family, romantic partners, animals, cities, cars, tools, hobbies, films, food, etc. Think about this. Are all of those things equal? When I say love, do I mean the same thing that you mean? When someone else uses it, do they mean the same thing that you mean? So this is an abstraction. Love is an abstraction. Abstractions differ from concrete language, which has a sensory component. For example, let's take the idea of a chair, right? Let's capitalize it. When I say chair, there is, for most of you, there is, for most of you, a definite picture that arises. We can all agree on the basic composition of what a chair is and what that might look like. Now, there are words, like the word human, that have concrete elements and abstract elements. I err on the side of thinking of them as abstractions because there are, and this relates back to classification and division if you think about it, there's a lot of trouble creating mutually exclusive categories. Like when I think about the concept of human, well, if I define human based on uh, uh, Homo sapiens, uh, ape descendants that have established a certain level of sentience, self-awareness, intelligence, well, now we have intelligent machines. We don't really know if animals are intelligent or not. We'd like to think that they aren't so that we can eat them without guilt. But hey, they might be. And there's, like that essay showed that you read earlier in the semester, there's some research that points to them having pretty deep intelligence, pretty fundamental intelligences. So that means that a chimpanzee, if it has the same level of intelligence as a standard Homo sapien, could be classified as human as well. And then do we extend human rights to that chimpanzee? I know these are absurd questions, but they're things that we have to think about when we're dealing with definition. So one of the things you are attempting to do in an extended definition is to take your abstract concept and make it clear, because like this concept of love here, that's not very clear, or the concept of human, whereas chair is much clearer. So let's take, and I don't want you to use this concept, but let's take the idea of reality television as our topic for this example. And I'm going to write an extended definition on reality TV. Now, since I am doing this, you cannot use this as your paper. You can't use this topic. So reality TV is the only topic from that list on page 443 in Successful College Writing that is no longer available to you. Now, the first thing I have to do is I have to set up an essay. And in my essay, the first piece of information I need is the introduction. So in order to do this, my introduction needs to follow this. It needs to introduce the reader to the topic, reality TV, give some background information, establish the importance of the topic, and it needs to deliver the thesis, which, if you remember from my earlier video lecture in the semester, a thesis equals a syntactical unit, a complete sentence that states a subject plus an opinion. It cannot be a fact statement, it cannot be a preference, and it must be a complete sentence. So I've actually already developed a paragraph for this paper in a previous lecture for another course, and I'm going to cut and paste that into here so you can see my example. I've even labeled it so that you can see the differences between these groups. So this is an introduction. The first piece here gives background information. In the early 1990s, Americans became enamored with a new form of television, reality TV. Reality TV is a bit of a misnomer. It means that the 30 minutes to an hour-long show is happening in real time. It is honest and it is recorded as it happens. Then I established the importance of the topic. But in reality, almost all of these television shows were scripted and edited to heighten drama or comedy. As a cultural phenomenon, reality TV is still with us into the second decade of the 21st century. Shows like Keeping Up with the Kardashians and American Pickers are popular and discussed often around water coolers during office breaks. And then I have my thesis statement. What we need to understand about reality TV is that there is no reality to it. So now I know I'm going to define it, and I'm going to show that this concept reality, that's what the word misnomer, it's misnamed, is not true. So you see here, this is what an effective introduction can look like in an in-class essay. Let me make that clear. This is an in-class timed essay. So you are writing with very limited time, sometimes no more than 30 minutes. I think the most I've ever seen an in-class essay, one single in-class essay be given, was 2 hours during a composition exam. So, you know, earlier lectures I talked about putting a story at the beginning, an anecdote, which is a story that illustrates a point, facts and figures. You don't have time for research. So you really just want to get background information about the topic. That's general knowledge. You want to establish the importance of the topic and introduce your argument right away. Okay? Now the next section of any good paper is going to actually be the body section. And the body section is made up of 3 parts, which I like to refer to as subsections, so that we move away from the concept of a paragraph. Now, in an in-class essay or a timed essay test, you may have to think of these as 3 paragraphs and use that form of topic sentence, example, explain, transition that I talked about early in the semester to help you develop this essay. So here is an example of one of my topics. My first topic is actually going to be reality TV is scripted, and then I'm going to give an example, which the first example that came to mind was actually the show Pawn Stars, right? So I give this history here. An example of this is Pawn Stars on the History Channel. Pawn Stars followed the daily activities of 4 men who ran a popular pawn shop in Las Vegas, Nevada. These characters included, and I talk about these characters, and then I go into detail about how their interactions between these men that brought viewers back for each episode. It's the interactions that were interesting, and that this drama was purely scripted, that it was not real, and you could even tell. And I needed to go into some more detail here, but this is just a rough draft to illustrate for you. You could even tell from the way they were delivered that many of these things are completely scripted in the show. And then there's the information that these interactions are tested out before the show even airs. So a lot of these events, that they interact with people, these things, they test it first. They make sure they have the information before they show it. It's not being aired live. And even if it was, even that would be scripted. And the drama surrounding whether they are of value or not is edited by the producers. And this is my transition. So I have here topic sentence, example, explanation, transition. And I will attach this to the video lecture for your reference as well, so you can sort of see what I'm talking about. Now, I would repeat that pattern 3 times. And here, I'm showing you, you can do it more than that. But here is what I determined for each of the categories for this paper. I'd have a reality TV is edited. I'd talk about Survivor and how editing makes that show watchable, because let's be honest, it would be boring as heck to watch 10, 12 people sit in the woods for weeks on end if we didn't create drama through cutting and pasting. We don't want to see their bathing practices. We don't want to see only but the most interesting aspects of their mating practices. We don't want to see day-to-day lives. People's lives are actually not that interesting. It's only in those few moments of intrigue or stress or crisis where things get interesting. And so then I would go into my next topic, which talks about characters rather than real people. That what we see on television in these reality shows, those are not the full story of these individuals. And I could use something like the Storage Wars show on A&E and examine the characters. And then I would transition into my conclusion. Now, the conclusion has been fairly weak for most of the papers that I have seen, first couple papers I've seen this semester. So this is what a conclusion needs to do in an in-class essay, but it's also useful to think of this as a model for your research essays that you're doing as the semester progresses as well. The first thing is you need to readdress the argument, which I do here by making the statement that reality TV is fake. Next, you need to tie together the main ideas or points, scripted, edited, characters as opposed to authentic individuals. And then finally, you need to answer the so what question. Too many people assume that life is really what they show us on reality TV, and some of its greater abuses and extremes have spilled over into informational media like cable news. That should actually be lowercase, so let's correct that. Capitalization error. This means that now our news media is adapting ideas from reality TV in order to get a larger viewership, and that is dangerous because when ratings trump true reality, we are all in for false information. So that would be my statement of why it's important to understand what reality TV is and how it affects us. So that's a conclusion right there. And hopefully you can see, as I said, I'm going to attach this to the lecture video itself so you can download it. Hopefully you can see from this sort of the concepts that you need to understand for developing this paper. Okay, so that's basically how you write the paper, and you need to think of it in that form. That's why I said early in the semester these formulas that I'm teaching are so important. You're really going to take this term, this concept, whichever of the prompt possibilities you select on page 443, and you're going to develop it without research this time. This time you're not using research because you're going to write it in a timed setting. Now, does that mean you can't go and read articles about it or watch a show on it or get some other information on it while you're waiting for me to actually assign the essay? Of course not. You can go find out as much as you want to find out about it. Just make sure whatever you put in your paper is coming from common knowledge so that you don't get knocked for plagiarism. Okay? So that's definition. I hope this lecture helps. As always, email me your questions. I am working steadily on grading your papers. I have meetings this week, as I said in a previous email. So I will be grading through the weekend and maybe into next week some. So just keep working on the reading, the quizzes, and really nailing down this concept of